Don Redden, who 31 years ago today passed away. Joe Macaluso was the local sports writer for the State Times and the Advocate and covered those LSU basketball teams on the successful runs and grew to have a great personal relationship with Redden. In fact, I'm looking at the article that was published on Wednesday, March 9th, 1988, that was given to me by Debbie Orso. Orso here is a local Baton Rouge resident who was dating Don Redden at the time, and Don actually passed away in her house on this morning 31 years ago today. Joe Macaluso with a great write-up on March 9th, and kind enough to join us here on Off the Bench with a couple of memories of Don Redden. Joe, thanks for the time. It's great to hear from you.
Hey, good morning, Jordy. I remember you as a young man or boy showing up in the locker room. I can remember that and remember seeing you at a couple of practices. So I know your relationship with Don was very special. And I will tell you, just from the press perspective on Don, he was a pleasure to be around all the time. We never ever had a time when there was a crossword or he was short, like some athletes can be, and very successful athletes. And Don was just a very special person.
Joe, there's usually a rule in our trade that the reporter doesn't get close to the athlete. It seems in reading your article from that March 9th write-up in the State Times and the Advocate that you guys shared a great personal relationship. Can you give our listeners an idea of the relationship that you and Don shared in his 4 years in Baton Rouge?
Well, I think it was because he was such a good family person, and those are the kind of people you can go to. Obviously, in our profession, for a good quote, a good insight, something that's going on with the team. And for that run that they made that year, he was a treasure to have around because there was nothing jaded about him. He just seemed to be the kind of person that you always wanted to have around you, just to look at young people and say, this is the kind of guy that you want to be in the forefront of our community. And I think, on that tragic day, and I just remember the sadness that crept into everybody.
It was a rainy Tuesday, wasn't it, Joe? If I remember,
Yes.
wasn't it raining? It was storming outside.
Yes, it was a terrible day. We were, you learn about things in the office too many times. I can remember, not only Don, the good people that you knew, throughout the time that, that I was working what I call hard sports, the real basketball, football, baseball, and losing people even way back when I was first working in, Butch Dewey and Mike Miley and Don Redden and Wally Pontiff, and losing all those people so very young. And you just saw the road was so golden ahead of Don, just because of the family background he had. I just a couple of years ago, I saw his parents again, and we visited, and just those days were so very special because there weren't, and we're talking a long time ago. We're talking 33 years ago now for 86. There wasn't the intense media that you see today. There weren't, like the ESPNs or all of the people you see today. It was kind of a close-knit group, of the media who covered basketball, and then I covered baseball too. But it just was very special to be able to deal and to see him on a daily basis, and how mature he was. Just what a good person. His persona, and you know this as well as anybody. His persona just infected everybody around him, and I don't know one person who ever could say a bad thing about Don Redden. And he was just a very special, special person.
Joe, I asked everybody who I should bring on to remember Don on this day, on the anniversary of his death, and 10 out of 10 people said you. It's great to hear from you again,
Oh,
and we
wow.
appreciate the memories.
Well, I'm glad you saw Miss Urso, because I haven't seen her in many, many years, and I remember her very well. And thank you for remembering Don, because he was just I just every day, when I think about the people we've lost, I think about him, because he was just so very good for our community, so very good for basketball, so very good for sports and young people, and he was just a beacon out there, and we just lost him too early.
Thank you, Joe. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you too, Jordy. Thank
Yes, sir.
you.
There he is, Joe Macaluso, with a couple of minutes here remembering Don Redden. And Joe led off that interview talking about me being around the LSU basketball locker room as a youngster. That was on Don Redden's hip. I mean, Don Redden took me in, and my parents were going through a divorce when I was 9 years old, my same age as my son right now, and thinking about a young guy like Don Redden, who was so influential in this town, taking me in. It's a fantastic story. Hour 2 next, off the bench.